So welcome everyone. Good to see everyone. We'll take a minute before we start our meditation practice and we'll just do a little purification. So purification in this case means that we check in with ourselves and we look for anything that might be in the way of doing our meditation practice tonight. Traditionally in the suttas, the things that get in the way are greed and its derivatives, ill will and its derivatives, and then ignorance or delusion. So greed is intense craving, it is wanting things to be different than they are. Ill will, sometimes that sort of anger or resentment that we can develop for others, sometimes for ourselves, and that can get in the way of meditation. And then finally, ignorance or delusion, which are, especially when we feel kind of neutral, we don't feel particularly strong about one thing or another, that we tend to just check out and we're no longer mindful or aware. And so that can be some of the delusion that we experience. So this is an opportunity to just check in and see if there's anything we're holding on to that would be better to let go of. And we can actually let go of it. And it works, which is kind of the amazing thing. So let's just take a moment together. Being present, being aware, just connecting with the thoughts of the mind, with the feelings of the body. And maybe as we let go of greed, ill will, and delusion, we can also begin to cultivate their opposite states, which are generosity, virtue, and mindfulness. Generosity, virtue, mindfulness. Cultivating these three states helps us to meditate because it purifies the mind and it puts us in a very good place for interacting with other people and the rest of the world. So these are the stepping stones to happiness. So with that, I'll sound the bell to do the purification. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Well, if you want to take a minute to get ready for your meditation, there are cushions and yoga mats and kneeling benches and all sorts of different things in that closet, so help yourselves. There's also a stack of blankets in there, so if you feel chilly, those are an option too. So anything you would like. And how does this light seem as we're about to start meditation? Seem too bright? Think it'd be better if I turn it off, or are you okay with it?
I'm okay with that. We can have our eyes closed anyway.
All right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't bother me.
Good. Good. So, get comfortable in your body, just as we're all sort of getting ready. I'm sitting in a traditional meditation posture. This is the Burmese posture. My legs are, they're crossed here, but they're not stacked. They're not folded. For me, this is a very comfortable way to sit, and it's one of the traditional ways. And while I get enjoyment out of sitting this way, for me it's very comfortable, and I appreciate kind of the tradition of it. It's not necessary to sit like this in order to get to do a great meditation. Really, most of the work of meditation is done on the inside. You know, it's done in the mind, it's done with the sensations in the body, regardless of how you're sitting or laying. So the key is to really get into a posture where there's a minimal amount of conflict in your body. So whether that's sitting in a chair or laying down on the floor, sitting cross-legged, whatever works for you is the right way to be. So you can get into position, you can look for a little bit of symmetry in your body. So what you're looking for is that there isn't like all of your weight supported on one hip or one sit bone or more on one side than the other, but your weight is evenly distributed on both sides of your body relatively, and that both sides of your body are doing about the same thing in terms of positioning. And the next thing we can do is check in with our breath and just let the breath be free and natural. There are some meditation practices, pranayama, where the breath is regulated or controlled. And sometimes we even do those, but for this meditation, we just let the breath come and go as it pleases. We breathe through the nose if possible, if it's comfortable to do that. And then the other thing we do is close the eyes. By closing the eyes, we eliminate the visual distractions that might cause the mind to wander or think. So we find that it's very helpful to close the eyes during the meditation. And for those of you who are sitting up, we try to sit with our backs relatively straight but not stiff, not rigid. And one thing you can do that might be helpful is to just let your chin tuck in a tiny bit. So you're just letting your head tilt forward ever so slightly. You might find that takes some of the tension off the back and off the neck. So that's something worth trying, seeing if that works for you. And then as far as your hands go, just place them anywhere it's comfortable on your body or next to your body. Placement of the hands helps with balance of the upper body. So again, all about comfort, all about eliminating conflict in the body. So with that being said, I'll sound the bell. And you can just follow the sound of the bell, and when it goes into silence, I'll start to guide us through the practice. Follow the sound of the bell as it fades into silence. And let the silence be a very warm and welcoming invitation to turn your senses inward. So this is a time where we can let go of one of the habits of the mind, which is to be projected outward and to be curious about the outside world. Instead, we gently turn the senses inward and we focus on the inner world, the feeling of being present in your own body. If you check in right now, there's a feeling, just a feeling tone of being here in your body. And by focusing on that, you begin to notice the natural stability, the natural peace and calm of your body. And having established this awareness, this sense of presence in the body, let's bring our awareness together up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. So just focus the awareness on the scalp, and in a very gentle way, be attentive, but observe any physical sensations that you notice anywhere in the scalp. So we just open up that awareness, any sensation, And sensations often show up as temperature. It may feel warm or cool to you, or neither warm nor cool, neutral temperature sensation. Sometimes there's a little feeling of air movement in the room, air moving across the hair. Sometimes there's sensations on the surface of the skin, and these might be a little tickle or an itch, or sometimes just a pulsation. And if you're laying down or if your head is making contact with the surface, you might notice that feeling of contact between your scalp and the surface. So we're just aware of these sensations. And as we're aware of them, we're not thinking about them. We're not evaluating them in any real way. We're just aware of the experience. And we find that that changes the experience of observing. Not trying to do anything with what is observed, just observing as it is from moment to moment. Now, as you observe, you may encounter tension anywhere in the scalp, muscular tension, which is sometimes present. And if you notice that, you can just let it go. Let the tension leave the body unconditionally. Just let it go. Tension is an added state, added to the natural state, and we don't need it at this time, so we let it go. And then we continue to observe the sensations, still in the scalp, temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. And then from the scalp, we can begin to move the awareness downward and feel it as it moves down into the forehead. There's a real feeling as that awareness moves. Sometimes it's like a warm, almost a fluid type of movement. That awareness moving down into the forehead and then into the temples. Feel as that awareness moves down through the eyebrows and into the eyes. And once again, with your objective awareness, you're just opening up to the physical sensations in these parts of the body now. So, temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin, anything you feel. And there's nothing that you're supposed to be feeling, nothing that you shouldn't feel. It's just whatever's there for you, you observe. And if tension becomes known by awareness, the response is to release. So that's an important thing as well. When we meet tension in the body, we don't react to it with negativity or by pushing it out. Tension is not the enemy. It's not bad. It's just something we don't need right now. So we just open up and let it leave. And so tension leaves the body. And then we continue to observe the sensations just as they are, coming and going. And then from the temples, we can move the awareness downward into the ears. Again, feel that flow of awareness. Very soothing, very pleasant flow as that awareness goes down into the ears. And then from the ears, allow it to start to move forward through the cheekbones and into the face. Movement of awareness. And then from the eyes down, feel it moving down through the nose, lips and mouth and chin. And so observing these parts of the face now. Again, any sensation, just observe. If there are multiple sensations at one time, you can focus more on the less obvious sensation. the more subtle sensation. And this helps to focus and sharpen the mind. And if you discover tension in the face anywhere, oftentimes we find it in the jaws, we clench our teeth, or the lips are pursed, or there's just tension somewhere in the face. So we can let that go. Feel that sense of release as the tension leaves the body, and then we just continue to observe. We maintain this continuity of awareness, just observing the coming and going of sensations, the noticing and releasing of tension, continued observation of sensation, all while being objective. And now from the chin, you can begin to guide your awareness downward into your neck. And you can begin to feel the different parts of the neck, the front of the neck or the throat, the sensations that you discover there. Move the awareness to the sides of the neck, and then move the awareness around to the back of the neck. You find that each of these areas of the body have their own unique sensations. So we spend a little time with each of them, just observing. We let that tension go, but the purpose of the practice is not just to release tension. The purpose is to be aware and to be present with the experiences of the body from moment to moment. And to do all of that without judgment, without evaluation. Just there, just present. And now from the neck, you can let the awareness begin to move downward into your shoulders. Observe the sensations in the shoulders, temperature, sometimes air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. You might notice in the shoulders a feeling of contact between your skin and your clothing. This might be a new sensation as we move through. Or you might notice the feeling of contact between your shoulders and the chair or the floor. So we're just observing these sensations. And if there's any tension in the shoulders, just release. That's the response. We encounter tension. The response is simply to let go. Very easy. Let the shoulders drop if they're shrugged. And then from the shoulders, we can let that awareness drift downward into the upper arms. Begin to experience the sensations in the upper arms. We can start with the biceps, the front part. From the tops all the way down to the elbow joints. And we can rotate awareness inward to the inside part of the upper arms. Really taking the time to observe attentively. Really, it's a quality of just remaining interested in the experience from moment to moment. Really be curious. And then moving the awareness to the back part of the arm, triceps, observing, releasing, and then moving the awareness to the outside part of the upper arms, from the elbows all the way up to the shoulders, observing and releasing. From the upper arms, we'll begin to guide the awareness downward into the elbows. Feel that movement. Very pleasant, very soothing movement of awareness. Down through the elbow joints. Feel it flowing downward into the forearms. Feel it moving further still down toward the wrists. And as that awareness moves through, it's just illuminating the sensations in the different parts of the arms. Any tension you discover, you meet that with release, just letting go. Moving through the wrists now, moving the awareness down into the hands. And then we'll look at the different parts of the hands, the sensations in the heels of the hands, and then moving to the palms of the hands. You might notice a feeling of moisture or perspiration on the palms of the hands. And moving around to the tops of the hands, the sensations are different here. Moving down into the fingers and the thumbs. And then we finally move our awareness down into the fingernails. And just take a few moments with awareness focused on the fingernails. Sometimes at first you really don't notice much of a sensation. And if you keep observing, you might begin to notice a very subtle vibration, very subtle pulsation in the fingernails. Let the hands relax. And then from the fingernails, we're going to make the move up to the top of the chest. So maintain that continuity of awareness and begin by focusing on the collarbones. Just bringing the awareness to focus here. And from the collarbones, let your awareness begin to drift down through your chest, illuminating each part of the chest as it moves down. And as that awareness flows slowly, it is awareness of sensation, and it is awareness of tension and just a releasing, complete letting go, and then a continued awareness of sensation. So we move all the way down to the base of the sternum, and then from there let the awareness kind of flare outward through the rib cage. Awareness, releasing, remaining present. And then we bring the awareness from the rib cage to the underarms. Spend a moment focusing here. Any sensations in the underarms. Sometimes a feeling of perspiration is there. Moving awareness down from the underarms through the sides of the body. And just feel it flowing all the way down to the waist, letting the tension go as you move. And as we move through the body with this practice, we try to cultivate a real feeling of compassion and loving kindness toward ourselves. So often we're kind of hard on ourselves, tough on ourselves. And so this is an opportunity to just let awareness flow through the body without judgment, without saying this is right and this is wrong, or this is good and this is bad. But just letting awareness flow through and say, this is what is. This is the truth of the present moment. And meeting tension with a complete releasing, we begin to set ourselves free. So now from the waist, we're going to bring the awareness forward into the belly. And just begin to observe the sensations of the belly as it rises and falls. You might notice that sensation, rising and falling. You might notice the sensation of expansion or contraction. Sometimes the feeling of your skin touching your clothing, and with the movement of the belly, there's a sensation there. And let the tension in the belly go. This is a place where many of us hold tightness. So releasing all the tension in the belly, just let it be completely free and relaxed. And staying with the sensations just as they are. And now from the belly, we're going to bring the awareness around to the top of the back. So maintain that continuity of awareness as we move. We'll start at the base of the neck and let the awareness move down through the upper third of the back. So you kind of feel it flowing down through the shoulder blades and outward, down through the spine. You're observing the sensations objectively, letting the tension go. And then you move down a little further through the middle third of the back. And then you let the awareness move just a bit further down through the lower third of the back. And throughout the back now, just observing sensations. These are the sensations at this moment in the body. They arise and pass away. They arise and pass away. Sometimes we'll encounter parts of the body where the sensations are perhaps unpleasant, maybe painful or difficult. And when we encounter these areas, we find that it can be difficult to remain objective because we don't like pain or discomfort. But what we discover is that regardless of our reaction to these difficult sensations, that they continue just as they are as we're sitting here in meditation. So those sensations are as they are. And you can try right now and just experiment with this, knowing those sensations are as they are and they're unpleasant. And just allow as much space for them to be as they need. Just allow all that spaciousness in your awareness for these sensations to be just as they are. There's no need to push against them with negativity or with disliking or with ill will or aversion. In fact, we discover when we push against them with these negative emotions that it serves to intensify them. But by just allowing, these are the sensations. Doesn't mean you're pretending to like it. It just means you're allowing it to be as it is. And so you let the awareness flow. And you let the tension go as much as you can. And you find that you are able to release tension in the back, and you're, in many cases, able to make peace with the difficult sensations. So this is a wonderful practice. Now from the lower back, we'll move our awareness downward into the sit bones. Just kind of feel it flowing down all the way to the sit bones. And once you're in the sit bones, you might notice the feeling of contact or bearing the weight of your body. And from the sit bones, you can move outward through the hips, feeling sensations there, and then letting that awareness flow further throughout the pelvis. And just taking the time to observe. Be aware of the sensations. And if you find any tension in any of these areas, again, just release softly, gently. Sometimes it's helpful to release tension with a smile, because we really are setting ourselves free. That's something to smile about. And now from the pelvis, we will move the awareness downward into the thighs. And we'll start just focusing on the top surface of the thighs. Any sensations there. Letting the tension go. And then moving around to the outer surface of the thighs. Same thing, just observing. These are the sensations of the body at this moment. There's tension here, I release. And then rotating to the underside of the thighs. Again, just observing the sensations just as they are. No good or bad, just sensation, just releasing. And then from here we move to the inside surface of the thighs, all the way from the top down to the knee joints, observing, letting go. And then we begin to flow this awareness down through the knee joints. If there's discomfort in the knees, use that practice of expansive awareness, that practice of objectively looking at discomfort as something that if it's there, it's there. And so why not make room for it to be as it is? Letting awareness flow through the knees, down into the calves. Feel it moving through the shins. Soothing flow of awareness. And then feel it moving down through the ankles now. From the ankles down into the feet. And then we'll focus on the different parts of the feet, the heels. They have their own unique sensations. The soles of the feet, sensations there. The balls of the feet. If there's any tension in the feet, let that go. If you're sitting in a chair and your toes are flexed, try to let that drop. Let the toes relax. And then moving the awareness around to the tops of the feet. Sensations there, and then moving down to the toes. This attentive awareness. As you move through, sometimes it's common to feel a sense of joyfulness in just this simple practice of observing the body as it is, with no expectations. Just letting it be and knowing it with awareness, this compassionate awareness, this goodwill, this loving kindness. Bring your awareness through the toes, down into the toenails. And we'll focus here on the toenails for a moment. And once again, we'll just see, are there any sensations here? Any subtle sensations? We discover eventually that there are sensations in all parts of the body, and that as we focus on them over time, we begin to notice them. We begin to focus the mind. Now from the toes, together let's bring our awareness one more time up to the top of the head, up to the area of the scalp. And this time, at your own pace, you can begin to guide your awareness back down through your body. Just guide it down part by part. Try to follow about the same path that we did together, just so nothing is forgotten. And you find that in a very brief moment, you can really observe a part of the body, its sensations, its tension. You can release it. And then move on. You find that you can do that, and just an in-breath, you can observe a part of the body, and then on an out-breath, you can observe another part of the body. And so by using the breath, you can just move the awareness through part by part, noticing those sensations, and noticing the tension. And noticing how in some places tension has come back after maybe just a few minutes ago you released it, and now you're discovering that tension has returned. And this is a very wonderful, very important discovery, which is that the body holds tension habitually as a response to difficult emotions, to stress, to worry, to anxiety, to guilt, to fear. And what happens is, as we go throughout the day, all of us experience these difficult, challenging emotions. Things happen, we react. There's an emotional reaction, along with it a physical reaction. The body holds tension. We do this as a way of kind of bracing ourselves, protecting ourselves from danger. And then maybe the mind moves on and you're thinking about something completely different, but the tension in the body remains. And as that tension in the body remains and sort of echoes and reverberates, it continues, it maintains that negative emotion that caused it in the first place. So we discover part by part all these places where tension shows up. When we notice it, there's no need to be upset or angry with the tension. We just notice it and we set it free. So there's nothing negative in this. It's all about noticing and, oh, wonderful moment. I release the tension in my body. Wonderful moment. I release the tension in my body, and I notice this is a place where I hold tension habitually. So I can visit this place again and again and let that tension go again and again. So moving your awareness from head to feet, from head to feet. Now let's bring our awareness together to the little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. And now we're just going to begin to focus on one small part of the body without moving much. So we start with that little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. And then we expand that awareness just a little further to include the rings of the nostrils. And we expand just a little further to include the nasal passages. So there's this triangular area of the nose, if you can imagine it. And within this triangular area of the nose, with your awareness here, just be aware of the movement of the breath in and out. So focus the awareness, and as you're breathing in, just be aware that you're breathing in. And as you're breathing out, just be aware that you're breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Sometimes you'll notice that an in-breath is a little shorter or a little longer. And we're not controlling the breath. So we're just observing the breath as it is. Sometimes we'll notice a breath is more shallow or more deep. Just observe. Try to stay with the breath for its full duration. An in-breath begins and we observe it as it starts coming in, as it slows down a bit, and then it pauses. It reverses direction, it becomes the out-breath. And then we stay with the out-breath gently through its full duration as it begins to slow down and pause. And then it changes direction. So this is the continuity of awareness that we speak of, just staying with the breath. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. And as you breathe, with awareness anywhere in this triangular area of the nose, see if you can discover the feeling of touch. As the air moves in, as the air moves out, as the air moves across the patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip, there is a feeling of touch somewhere in the triangular area of the nose. So you become aware of this feeling of touch, the in-breath, the feeling of touch, the out-breath, the feeling of touch. And as you continue to observe the feeling of touch, You may start to notice some subtle sensations within that touch. Breathing in, the air is just a little bit cooler. And then when you breathe out, the air is just a little bit warmer. Breathing in, the air is a little more dry. Breathing out, the air is a little more moist. So there's so much to observe in this triangular area of the nose. All of this movement of the breath, the touch, and the sensations of the breath. And you just stay focused on it as it comes and goes. For many of us, as we're practicing this way, we'll notice that distractions come up. And that from time to time, our awareness might be drawn away from the breathing and from the nose by a sound. We hear a sound of cars going by or of sound in the building. And in the moment you become aware that you've been distracted by a sound, this is a wonderful moment. Smile at this moment of recognition and very gently guide the awareness back to the nose. So there's no problem. This is the habit of the mind to wander away, and so we are training it with love and some gentleness to come back to the nose. And then just reestablish awareness and be with it again. One breath, two breaths, maybe another sound pulls the awareness, and we do the same thing. We notice, oh, distraction. I'll bring the awareness back to the breath. And we focus again. And so we're really not doing anything with the distraction. We're just guiding the awareness back to where we want it to be. And so as we practice like this, sometimes we'll notice the mind has been distracted or the awareness has pulled away from the breath to follow some strong sensations in the body. Sometimes it's a feeling of restlessness or a little ache or a pain or an itch. And we work with it in the same way. As soon as you notice that, as soon as you notice distraction has occurred, this is a wonderful moment because it is your opportunity to guide the awareness back to the nose. Very gently, very lovingly, bring the awareness back and start again. Reestablish awareness. Try to stay with it. One breath, two breaths. And if another distraction arises, follow the same process. And then finally, sometimes the mind will just wander away. Just get lost in thought. You'll be remembering or planning or imagining. And so, part of the practice here is to just notice distraction. Distraction has arisen in the mind. I guide the awareness back to the breath. I refocus on the breathing in and out, the touch of the breath and the sensations, and staying within that triangular area of the nose. And this is the practice. And you can be distracted 100 times in a minute, and that's okay. Just keep bringing awareness back. Just keep bringing it back. So let's sit in silence together for just a few minutes. Let's meditate in silence in this way. And then in a few minutes I'll sound the bell to end the meditation practice. Take your time. Take your time coming out of that. Good job, everybody. Nice long meditation practice. If you want to, if anybody wants tea, there's tea in the kitchen. Cups and everything is out, and there's the water's in an air pot in there. So help yourself if you want a little tea. Sometimes it helps you to stay awake as we go into the talk. So we'll just take a minute break and then we'll begin the talk. Here's a question.
Oh, gosh.
Here's a question to see if anybody noticed this kind of subtle thing as we were going through the meditation. There were a couple of places where I mentioned bring some love and compassion to this place, to this part of the body as you're working with it. Bring the spirit of love and compassion and kindness to yourself as you're doing it. And I wonder if anybody notices how when you bring that it sort of softens the experience a little bit, and that there is a feeling of just kind of a gentleness that starts to take over. It's one of the neat parts of the practice is we start to realize that we can come up with this desire to cultivate love and compassion and kindness, and we really start to feel it in the body. That's the first place we feel it, is in our own bodies, and it softens the practice, makes it easier to just continue. But it's an important thing to do because we're pretty tough on ourselves, right? We're pretty tough on ourselves most of the time. We kind of get down on ourselves for the things that we did that we think we should have done a better job on, or that we wish we would have done different. So it's helpful to bring that compassion and that loving kindness to ourselves, and forgiveness. So before we start on the talk for tonight, I want to tell a little story about forgiveness. It's possible some of you may have heard this before. I think I may have shared it at some point in the past years. But this is a forgiveness story by Jack Kornfield. Jack Kornfield is a wonderful meditation teacher. He's affiliated with IMS and is one of the founders of Spirit Rock Meditation Center out in California. But just a beautiful person, wonderful teacher. He's written many books. And so he shares this story from a true personal experience that he had. So I'll read this to you. On the train from Washington to Philadelphia, while on my way to my father's memorial funeral service, I sat down next to an interesting fellow who worked with young boys, particularly those in jail and prison, as part of an inner city project in Washington, D.C. And he told me this story. He said a young kid, 14 years old, wanted to get into a gang. And the way that he proved himself to enter the gang was to shoot somebody. It was an initiation rite. And so he shot this kid he didn't even know. He was apprehended, brought to trial, and at the end of the trial, convicted. Just before he's taken away in handcuffs, the mother of the boy who was shot stands up, looks him in the eye, and says, "I'm going to kill you." And then she sits down. After being in prison for a year or so, the boy is visited by that mother. He's kind of frightened. She says, "I've just got to talk with you." And they have a little bit of a conversation. And as she leaves him, she says, "Do you need anything? Cigarettes?" She leaves him a little money. And then she starts to visit him. She goes every few months. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, she starts visiting him more regularly, talking to him. And when he's about to get out, at the age of 17 or 18, she asks, "What are you going to do?" And he says, "I have no idea. I got no family, no nothing." And she says, "Well, I've got a friend who has a little factory. Maybe he can help you get a job." So she arranges that with the parole officer. And then she asks the boy, "Where are you going to stay?" And he says, "I don't know where I'm going to go." And she says, "Well, I have a spare room where you can stay with me." So he comes and stays in the spare room. He takes the job at the factory. And after about 6 months, she says, "I really need to talk with you. Come into the living room, sit down, let's talk." She looks at him and says, "Remember that day in court when you were convicted of murdering my son for no reason at all to get into your gang? And I stood up and I said, 'I'm going to kill you'?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am. I'll never forget that day." And she looks back and says, "Well, I have. You see, I didn't want a boy who could kill in cold blood like that to continue to exist in this world. So I set about visiting you, bringing you presents, bringing you things, and taking care of you. And now I've let you come into my house and got you a job and a place to live because I don't have anybody anymore. My son is gone and he was the only person that I was living with. I set about changing you and you're not that same person anymore. But I don't have anybody and I want to know if you'd stay here. I'm in need of a son and I want to know if I can adopt you." And he said yes, and she did.
Wow.
Just a beautiful story. Story on forgiveness. And if you can bring that level of forgiveness to your life, that's really a powerful thing. But I think for us, if we can start in just some of the smallest ways, it really helps. You know, there's all kinds of things where people have slighted us or done things that hurt us, and sometimes big things, you know. But what we discover is that when the non-forgiveness is in us, I mean, we're really the ones that suffer. It's not the other person. Most of the time, they're not even aware of it, right? But the non-forgiveness is in us, and it's non-directional. We can't take non-forgiveness and focus it on this person over here and think it's going to go over there. Non-forgiveness is just non-forgiveness. It's here, right? And it may or may not get to that other person. So just a little thought as we go through the practice. The practice of meditation is in many ways a practice of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for the way we feel in our bodies and in our minds, and not getting upset or uptight about that, and just letting things be as they are. And we find that there's just tremendous peace and beauty in that simple thing. So, cultivating forgiveness. And that kind of leads us into tonight, what I want to talk about, which is Upekkha Parami, the perfection of equanimity. So we'll start talking about that, and I have a handout for it. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And as we talk about this equanimity tonight, you'll start to see the parallels between that and forgiveness. equanimity and forgiveness are very closely related. And in fact, without forgiveness, equanimity can be pretty difficult. So this is part of a series that we've been doing on the 10 paramis, or the 10 perfections. Thank you very much. Part of a series that we've been doing on it, and we're at the last of the 10. So I'll just read through them, what they have been. Dana parami, which is the perfection of giving. Sila parami, which is the perfection of virtue. Nakama parami, the perfection of renunciation. Panya parami, the perfection of discerning wisdom. Viriya parami, the perfection of energy. Kanti parami, the perfection of patience. Saka parami, the perfection of truthfulness. Aditana parami, the perfection of determination. Metta parami, the perfection of loving kindness. And tonight, Upekkha parami, the perfection of equanimity. And as I've shared most weeks when we started to talk about these things, these are not things that are somehow outside of you that you need to figure out how to collect them and acquire them and bring them in and turn them into something you own. These are qualities of your character and of your being that already exist. You've already got all of these. They are already part of who you are. What the teaching is doing is saying, recognize that these are aspects of your character. These are things that you have. And then work to cultivate them into prominence. Work to perfect them. So that's really what the practice is. This is taking what you've already got, who you already are, and just working with it in some subtle ways to make it a stronger part of your life. And the result of all of that, perfecting any of these, improving any of these, is greater feeling of happiness and liberation and freedom for you. So very wonderful, very wonderful. But again, not something you don't have. This is what you do have. So we work to perfect it. We work to improve it and strengthen it. So the 10th parami is Upekkha, the perfection of equanimity. In the tradition, Upekkha is perfected by metta. That means loving kindness helps to perfect equanimity. So when you're feeling loving kindness, when you're putting out loving kindness, it helps to intensify this feeling of equanimity. And if it seems at all dark to you, feel free to turn on the little lamp behind you if you'd like. It's up to you folks. The dictionary. If you look up equanimity in the dictionary, and equanimity is a term we use a lot. Just about every week we talk about equanimity in some way, shape, or form. So if you look it up in the dictionary, it's defined as a mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. And in the context of the teachings on meditation, the dictionary definition applies. All of that's correct, and it's in alignment with what the meditation teachings say, but there are some subtleties to this. So that's what I want to get into so that everybody understands really what this equanimity is and what it isn't. So I think this will be helpful. Upekkha, again, the Pali word for equanimity. It's one of the 10 paramis, or the 10 perfections, as well as one of the 4 Brahma-viharas. So at the end of the evenings, we always we recite the 4 Brahma-viharas, and at the end, may all beings be peaceful, free, and equanimous. So we always talk about that. So equanimity is the last of the 10 perfections, and it's the last of the 4 Brahma-viharas. So that's kind of an interesting thing, that it takes place at the end of both of those, and kind of illustrates how important it is and how it's the ultimate result of skillful practice. And the feeling of Upekkha, of equanimity, it is not, one of the things it's not is sort of a dull, disconnected, blah feeling. You know, sometimes we think equanimity might mean just sort of being checked out or being detached in a negative way. I don't care. I don't care what happens. But equanimity is not that. It is, you're very engaged in what's going on, but there's this peaceful objectivity and balance to it, which enables you to see things with wisdom that you're normally not able to see. Because if you bring your awareness to a situation, and let's just say it's something that you're really angry about, just something that's made you angry, if you bring your awareness to something in that way, it's impossible to be objective, right? I mean, you might understand some of the truth of what's going on, but if you bring this intense emotion to it, it's going to be difficult to be objective, and so it's going to be difficult to cultivate wisdom. And so what we often do is we do things or we say things that kind of keep problems rolling. So this upekkha, this equanimity, is the ultimate result of our skillful practice, and it's marked by feelings of contentment and joy. So it's a very pleasant state. And it's not only a blissful feeling of peaceful balance and evenness of the mind, but it is the choice of non-attachment. If you make the choice to be non-attached, it is the choice of non-attachment. Equanimity is the result of that choice, as well as the product of non-attachment. And let me see if I can say this right. If you choose non-attachment, that is also choosing equanimity. And if you choose non-attachment and equanimity, it produces more non-attachment and equanimity. So it's both cause and effect. There's a verse from the Majjhima Nikaya. This one I love, and it's on the bulletin board out in the community room. But this is such a simple way of putting it. He says, let me tell you what we teach. And he's talking about the Sangha. He's talking about a gathering of meditators that had come. When a person sees a form with the eye, usually a feeling of liking or disliking comes into being, right? So you see something with the eye, and there's this, I like it, I don't like it, and that's usually the way it works. The person then understands that liking or disliking has arisen, but that either one is not inevitable, but is conditioned and dependent on causes. So the person heads for a state in which there is equanimity and finds that in so doing, the liking or disliking has vanished. And they see things as they are. That is how the person controls their senses, and that is what we teach. So there's a lot there. So we might spend a moment kind of unpacking that. So it's saying a human has 5 physical senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And that's how we make contact with the world around us. So in this one, they use the sense of sight, but it really could apply to any one of the 5 senses. So when a person sees a form with the eye, or they experience a form with one of the other senses, that feeling of liking or disliking comes into being. It usually triggers a response of pleasant sensation or unpleasant sensation. And it can be very subtle. Like we hear the ambulance going by, just a little feeling of kind of maybe a little dis-ease, because with that we associate, you know, maybe somebody's hurt, or maybe somebody's sick, or there's a fire. So different things that come into our consciousness, however they come into our consciousness, we usually respond to them with a feeling of disliking or liking, one or the other. And the next sentence, the person then understands that liking or disliking has arisen. So that's a very important thing, and that's what awareness does for us, is that at some point we realize, oh yeah, I'm aware that I'm feeling aversion toward that sound, or I'm feeling disliking towards this person, or towards, this idea. So that's the second component, is that there's awareness. Oh yeah, that's the way I'm feeling this way about it. I'm feeling this way about it. We know then that these things are not inevitable. In other words, our reactions. Our reactions are not inevitable, but they are conditioned, and they're dependent on causes. So one of the stories that I tell to kind of explain how that it's not inevitable, but it's conditioned and dependent on causes, is when I've been in the long-term monastic retreats, and I've shared this story many times, but during those long monastic retreats, they, at 4 a.m., somebody walks through by where we're all sleeping in the dorm there, and they bang the bell really loud. And they walk down the hall doing that at 4 a.m. And I grew to hate that sound of, you've got to wake up, you've got to get out of bed, you've got 30 minutes to get to the meditation hall, it's cold outside, it's raining. Just started to hate the sound of that bell in the morning. Later on, when it was time for breakfast, which was about 8 a.m. So at 4 a.m. we'd get up, 4:30 we got to the meditation hall, we'd meditate till 8 a.m. and then we would get to have breakfast. And so you hear the same sound. And it's like, oh, that beautiful sound. I get to go eat breakfast. So the same sound happens, the same thing is happening, but based on conditioning, my liking or disliking has changed, right? So depending on conditioning and causes. So for me, I know, oh, morning bell, I'd rather stay in bed, I'd rather stay warm and cuddle and clean and sleep. And then later, oh, I get to go eat breakfast and I'm really hungry, and so having breakfast is wonderful. So they use that bell for all these different signals throughout the day, and each time there was sort of a different emotional or a different response of liking or disliking. And so there's no inherent good or bad in the sound of that bell, but it's dependent upon what it represents to you at any given time. So that's really true about our experiences with everything that enters our sense doors, our 6 sense doors. We're always sort of judging it, you know? The things that in one moment might be pleasurable or wanted, in the next time you encounter them, they might be not pleasurable or not wanted. You know, it depends on that conditioning. So that's that part. So then what they're saying is, okay, so now you're aware of this. So you're aware that I'm having this experience with one of my senses, or with multiple senses. A feeling of liking or disliking has arisen. I know that's based on some sort of conditioning. It's not an absolute thing. And so my next step is to head for a state in which there is equanimity. So I head for a state in which there's equanimity. We're going to talk about how we do that and what that means. But so we head for a state in which there is equanimity, and we find, when we do that, that the liking or disliking has vanished. And then we see things as they are. It's just a bell. It's just a bell. And then we see, and when that bell rings when I don't want to get out of bed, it's unpleasant and I don't like it. And when it rings when it's breakfast time, it's pleasant and I like it. And so there is wisdom. So what you're doing is you're seeing the full truth of that. This experience that I have generates liking or disliking based on conditioning and causes. And so oftentimes those are not inevitable. So this is a very powerful thing when you start to realize it. And so the practice then is to head for that state of equanimity, and then you realize, okay, now there's neither liking nor disliking. It doesn't mean now I just don't care anymore, but it means, oh, that liking or disliking that was triggered from whatever that conditioning was, That's vanished. Now I'm seeing things with the eyes of wisdom. I'm seeing things through this wisdom, panya. Very important. So you see things as they are. And so that is how a person controls their experiences. So it's seeing things through the eyes of wisdom. That person who maybe makes me feel these feelings of disliking, that's based on conditioning. Some people might see that same person as wonderful, so who's right, who's wrong? Well, you could get into that, but really what we're trying to notice is that we have these reactions to things, and if we're aware, we can steer ourselves into equanimity, and then we see things with wisdom. We see things objectively. And sometimes I use the idea of going to a doctor with an injury. If you go to a doctor, let's say you're sick, let's say you got a really bad pain in your belly, and so you go to the doctor and you say, doctor, I've got this really bad pain in my belly, and you're pretty scared about it. You're thinking, I don't know, never had anything like this, this feels really bad. So you're pretty scared, you're pretty emotional, maybe you're crying, kind of panicking or something. If you go into your doctor, let's just say your doctor is a very compassionate, very loving person, and is very concerned about you. And so they sit down with you and they say, yeah, this is just horrible, I'm scared too. And the doctor starts crying and they're really, boy, this is really terrible. This is just awful. Well, if that's the way your doctor responds, you're good luck. It's kind of nothing is going to be done to help you solve the problem because the doctor is now swept away. But if the doctor comes in, a good doctor, you tell her, doctor, I've got this pain, I'm terrified, I'm crying, it's horrible. And so what does she do? The doctor is objective. Doesn't mean she's not compassionate or caring. In fact, just the opposite. She is compassionate and caring, and so she is objective. And she says, okay, what does it feel like? Does it hurt here? Does it hurt here? And because she is detached, because she is objective, she's able to determine what these symptoms mean, and she's able to figure out what's wrong with you. So kind of in that sense, this objectivity, it's not an absence of compassion or caring, but it's really a, let me filter out all the stuff that isn't helpful right now. It's like, yeah, I recognize that you're in pain, but let's figure out what's causing that so that we can fix it. So, Upekkha as non-attachment. From time to time, I try to write a 1 or 2 sentence definition of the word attachment, and I try and do it in a different way each time, but one that captures the essence. Because this is something that's kind of slippery for folks. So, attachment is the belief that obtaining or possessing a certain thing, whether it's a physical object or a state of consciousness, will lead to happiness, well-being, and lasting satisfaction in such a way that the loss or change of that object, or just the contemplation of the loss or change of that object, will lead to suffering now or in the future. So that's a description, that's a definition of what attachment is. So there's a belief element to it. I think if I have that, then I'm going to be happy. If I can get a hold of that, if I can own that thing, I think I'll be happy about that. I think I'll have higher self-esteem. I think I'll feel good about myself, right? And we believe that it contains these ingredients of happiness, well-being, and lasting satisfaction. And because we have that belief, as long as we're separated from that object, there's a degree of suffering, right? So have you ever wanted something and you've gone to the store, you really want it, and they say, oh, sorry, we're out of stock, right? Well, how does that feel? It doesn't feel good, right? It's a feeling of suffering. It's not maybe very intense, but it's like, oh, geez, doggone it, Do you have any anywhere else? I'll drive 150 miles if I need to get that thing, because I really think it's going to make me happy. So there's that belief, and it's that belief that it contains some degree of happiness or well-being or satisfaction. So to the point where you're very motivated to get it, and as long as you're separated from it, it's painful or it's causing suffering. Or just the contemplation of the loss or the change of that object will lead to suffering now or in the future. So sometimes I use the example of if you get a new car and you park it in the supermarket parking lot, you're usually real careful when you get a new car and you park it kind of far in the back because you don't want to get your doors dinged. And so the thought of, boy, if my doors got dinged, I'd really be bummed out, you know? So that's just a simple example of something where we conjure up this idea that if this happens to this thing that I'm very attached to, I'm going to be very upset about it. I'm going to feel a lot of suffering. And so contemplating the loss or change of that object leading to suffering now or in the future. And we do it with objects. We do it a lot with people. We do it a lot with our partners, you know, people that we're in relationship with. And, you know, maybe the people who are our partners, we sometimes think, boy, if that person ever left me, I don't know, you know, I would be devastated. I don't think I could be happy. Or some people feel like, boy, if that person would only leave, I'd be happy, right? So again, there's no inherent intrinsic, it's based on causes and conditions. Here's a neat thing about possessions. Ajahn Chah says this. He says, just consider, suppose we came to possess a very expensive object. The minute that thing comes into our possession, our mind changes. Now, where can I keep it? If I leave it there, somebody might steal it. We worry ourselves into a state, trying to find a place to keep it. And when did the mind change? It changed the minute we obtained that object. Suffering arose right then. No matter where we leave that object, we can't relax, so we're left with trouble. Whether sitting, walking, or lying down, we are lost in worry. So I love that one by Ajahn Chah. He's a teacher in the Thai forest tradition, passed away, but just a beautiful teacher, had left behind volumes of his teachings in book form. So we're fortunate for that. So this isn't to say, so don't ever want anything and don't ever possess anything. A lot of people, you know, they read this and they read these teachings and they misinterpret, and they think it means that you have to be just very austere and you have to live a very stark life with no possessions and no passion. But that's not true at all. What it's saying is you should be able to have these things, but you should also be able to have them without suffering, right? And so there's a way to do that, and that is by eliminating the attachment. So it's bringing wisdom to this circumstance so that you're not going to suffer. And then you also know that there's some inevitability that, yeah, you know what, eventually my new car, it's going to get things in it. It's going to get scratched up. You know, it's going to happen. So when you know that that's going to happen and you've kind of made peace with it, well, it's not so bad, you know. I mean, I know someday my hair is going to fall out. I know someday, you know, I mean, physical body changes, gets older. I'm aware of it. Attachment isn't negotiable. It's a fact. So often people will say, well, hey, I'm attached to my loved one. I love my partner. I love my child. I love my friend. Is that wrong? And attachment is neither right or wrong. It's like gravity. We can't say that gravity is right or wrong. Gravity is a fact. So it's a misunderstanding to look at attachment as right or wrong, because those concepts lead us away from the truth of the matter. Attachment leads to suffering. Sooner or later, it leads to suffering. So then we could say, well, love without the added attachment. What does that feel like? And that feels wonderful. So we try to move toward that state. And sometimes, starting with something like love, that's a pretty tough one to develop equanimity, non-attachment around right away. But if you start to develop non-attachment around some of the smaller things in life, it feels like it's just lightening your load. It feels like it's lightening your spirit, lightening your heart. And so maybe you have still a few things that you're really attached to, but because with a wisdom mind you've been able to kind of detach from many other things, you're still much lighter and much more free. And you're starting to see how the process works. So the Pali word upadana, this is a different word now that we're bringing up, that's usually translated as attachment, clinging and grasping. But the literal translation of upadana is fuel, as in the fuel that keeps a mental process active. So when the fuel is removed, the process comes to an end. In this case, the process is attachment leading to suffering. So another example, if there's ever been something that you thought, okay, I really want that, I need to go get it, I need to acquire that thing, for whatever reason. And let's say a little bit of time goes by, and you notice that around this, I really want that thing, I really want that thing, you notice that there's a lot of tension in the body, and this feeling of the wanting mind is unpleasant. There's suffering around it. Let's just say some time goes by, and your mind changes, and you no longer want that thing. Well, then the fuel, it's like the fuel has been removed, and there's no longer that suffering. So, this is the experience of upadana. As long as you're fueling that desire with the wanting and without the wisdom, it continues to fuel that process. But as soon as you remove the fuel, the process comes to an end. And sometimes I look at it as having a pot on a hot stove, a pot on the stove that's beginning to boil over. So to keep it from boiling over, you go over and hold the lid down. And of course, if you've ever done that, the only thing that does is increases the pressure. But if instead you remove the fuel from the flame, the upadana, the boiling comes to an end. So it's very much the same way with us and with the mind. When we're starting to suffer because of the things that we're attached to, bringing wisdom to it, bringing equanimity to it, we're able to kind of turn off that gas supply, let things start to cool down. We're almost at the end of our time, so I just want to read this 5 remembrances. This is kind of a neat little text. The Buddha advised his students, his monks and nuns, to practice every day by reciting the 5 remembrances, and usually in the morning as kind of part of their morning ritual. And so the 5 remembrances, they sound a little negative, but what they are is a way of reminding us of the truth of the results of attachment, and they really kind of set us free. They're liberating. They're actually joyful, even though they sound a little negative in the beginning. So I just read them to you, and I encourage you tomorrow morning when you wake up, maybe sit down and just read these. I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. And for all of us that are growing old and who have tried to escape growing old by doing what we can to keep the hair growing or to color it so it's not as gray or to, whatever we need to do, there's suffering in that. But if you say, hey, I'm of the nature to grow old, and so that's going to happen. There's no way to escape growing old. Doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself. It just means, hey, this is an inevitable part of the process. I am of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape ill health. Again, doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself and exercise and eat right, but eventually you're going to have ill health. That is part of the human experience. That's part of our incarnation as human beings. It's bound to happen. I'm of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. So with these first three, these are kind of personal and specific to the physical condition. What these make me think about is, hey, I appreciate the fact that I can walk around good now. I appreciate the fact that, you know, I can hear and I can see, and you know, I have these abilities and these capacities now. So I appreciate those, and I know that at some point that might change. And I know that that might change for others around me. In fact, it's inevitable. And so we're not in denial. And because of that, when things do start to change, we're more at peace with them. It's like, oh yeah, I knew that was coming. I've been reading that every morning, that this was happening. And then all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change, right? So our little kids, they start to grow into big kids, and then they start to grow into old kids, and there's no way to escape being separated from them. People grow up and change. Relationships start and end. And then the last is, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. And knowing that, I mean, that's wonderful. So what I've got is my actions. So everything I do that helps another person make it through the checkout line at the store, or makes it through busy traffic, or a friend who's having a tough day. I mean, these actions, these are wonderful things that have consequences. And being aware of that, it's like it creates this safe, beautiful place for us to stand. So all of these 5 remembrances, to me, they're really remembrances to really appreciate the present moment. Really love what you've got. Really cherish the present moment. So I'll leave it here, and we'll finish the last part of this next week. And let's, before we go, let's just take a few seconds to practice those 4 Brahma-viharas. Brahma-viharas means highest states of consciousness. Sometimes it's translated as sublime states of consciousness. So these are the 4 highest states of consciousness. And the first one is, we usually recite it. I'll say it. You try and feel it. I'll say it and you guys feel it. So, may all beings be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering. And may all beings be surrounded by love and kindness. And may all beings be joyful and happy. And may all beings be equanimous, be free and peaceful and balanced. And with all of these, we don't pick and choose who gets it. We just put it out there. May all beings receive these wonderful 4 Brahma-viharas. And to you who are sharing this space with me tonight, I am so grateful for your presence. May you all be truly, truly happy. Blessings of peace, blessings of happiness, be well. Thank you for coming. You gonna take a nap, Abby? Just curl up on the floor. I'll send Lucy down here. She'll cuddle with you. She will snuggle with you as long as you want.
You'd like, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be.
I'll take her home if you want me to.
See you, Don.
See
Good
you,
night.
Emily. I'm like your dog.
Hey, whoever goes out the back door, if you would turn on the light switch for the ramp, that would be much appreciated.